Okay, I think we're going to make a start. Right. Welcome, everyone. As you probably know, my name is Nancy Lenezette, and I'm the high school principal here at SFS.
Morning, I'm Nicole Cook. I'm the Director of High School Counseling and University Admissions. Good to see everyone.
So this morning's talk is the first in a series of parent talks. I'm very glad that we are doing this finally. It's taking us a little while to get started. And so now we're having a few talks in quick succession. As you've noticed, we're having 3 in November. So this is our first one today. And the topic is parents and university applications. And we knew we would get your attention with that one. It's a very popular topic. And I'm glad that we're having so many participants. It's wonderful. So you may be wondering what this session is about exactly. And I know some of you probably are joining us with younger students. So we wanted to make sure this was relevant to all of you. And it's a general talk. So this is really about parents and the application process. This is not a talk that's going to give you all the detail about all the paperwork you need to submit or anything like that. It's about your role as a parent, your parenting role in the process of university application. And we're going to take that in a wide way. So we're going to start with younger students and then talk about all the way to letting them go when they are seniors. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can prepare your child, which will be relevant to people with younger students. And then we will talk about how to support your child through the process and some of the things you can do to make the process a little bit smoother for your whole family. Okay, let's start. So I've muted everyone, by the way, because otherwise it can get quite chaotic. However, once we're finished, our presentation is not very long. Once we're finished, you'll be able to ask questions. And the best way to ask questions will actually be through the chat function. So rest assured that you will have time to ask your questions, but it will be through chat so that it's not chaos. And I'm glad I did that because I can see we have 84 participants already. So let's talk a little bit about younger students. And I think you can go down as young as middle school for this. One of the things you can do to prepare your students for the process is to take an interest in universities and university life in general. So something that's very efficient is to do university visits, even if it's in a university you might not necessarily be interested in. It's very useful for your children to see what a university is. We all know what a university is, but children very often have no idea. So I remember doing that with my own daughter when she was only about 12, maybe she was little. And every time we went to visit a new city, we would just go and see the university. And she had very sweet comments like, oh, they have a cafe and they have a bank. And, it was totally irrelevant to the courses or the application process. However, it really helped her to start picturing herself in a university environment. And then as she grew up, she started really making comparison between different universities and say, oh, I like this one because there seems to be more people from different countries. And oh, I don't like this one because it's in the middle of a city and there's no green spaces and small things like that. And then it became more and more relevant to actual courses and the city and things like that. And so now in grade 11, she has been visiting university for years, partly because I had to visit them for my own job, but also partly because she loved it. And she's very well informed. She knows exactly what the kind of university she wants to go to, and she can picture herself in there. And I'm starting the process with my grade 8 boy. That can be a really bonding experience as well, really fun, and it's extremely motivating. So whenever the students, have a little dip in motivation, the picturing themselves in university is a really healthy way to actually keep going and think, instead of thinking, why am I doing all this? There are days where they think that, like, why am I doing all this homework? Why am I working so hard? Why do I have to keep doing all these different maybe activities? And I think this projecting themselves into the future is very helpful. So one of the best things you can do as a parent is to engage them in the university life and university visits really early on. Of course, at the moment, it can be difficult to visit universities, but the good news is universities have really moved online. And so there are a lot of online university talks that you can attend. And that's a really fun thing to do as a family, where you can make notes and, have maybe a little notebook where you compare your universities and, what kind of courses do they do? Did I like what the presenters were saying about the atmosphere, and is it a big city, and all these different details? You can still get that quite well. And in fact, the presentations are very often the same one that you would see if you were going to a university tour on campus. It's not as wonderful, of course, but it's still actually a really efficient way to see lots of universities, possibly even in lots of different countries, if you're not sure where to go exactly. So I strongly recommend engaging in that as a family and making it a positive, fun experience. No pressure, no, you better work really hard if you want to get here because it's not going to happen with the grades you have right now. None of that. They will figure that out themselves often that, the thing we started doing about last year in grade 10 was to start looking at entry requirements. So, okay, you want to go to the university, but look how many points you would need to get there. And then start slowly becoming more practical and realistic about the university choices. And that leads me nicely to my next point, which is, as parents, it's really difficult to know how much to push students. So some parents will just really push. Some parents will be completely back off. And we've seen students turn one way or the other with either types of parents. So you can never quite predict the result. Some students are really self-motivated because their parents gave them a lot of freedom. Other students are really self-motivated because they want to make their parents proud. So you can't really predict what effect it will have. Teenagers are a bit contrary, and sometimes they just do the opposite of what you're trying to do. So we will talk a bit more about expectations and things like that. But what's sure is that because they are a bit contrary, they can react badly or like the opposite way if you push constantly and too hard about maybe being obsessive about one university or one career, and they could actually react and say, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not doing this, because that would be their way of rebelling. So giving a range of choices in terms of universities and in terms of possible careers, and asking them questions. Do you think you'd be happy doing that job? Do you think this university you could do a bit better than that? Or, this kind of questions is probably more conducive than actually you making your wishes too prominent in the process, because, as I said, teenagers may react against that and it might backfire quite a bit. And I want to talk briefly as well about the magic triangle, which is when they get a little bit older, they need to start thinking about the subjects they're going to pick, which comes quickly because that's in grade 10 and we start in January. So you can see it's, not even halfway through their high school career, they have to pick the subjects that will get them into university. So it's really early. They don't always know what they want. And they don't even always know what they're really good at. However, we sometimes have a tendency to just look at the career and not really consider the other two too much. And it's really important to have that balance. So sitting down and looking at all three of these aspects. What are they good at? What are the subjects that, sometimes students just say, oh, this is a really easy subject. And they don't realize that's because they're just good at it, and you have to remind them, no, it's not an easy subject. You're good at that. You find it easy because you love it and you work hard, and you're good at it. So it seems easy to you. And so highlighting those subjects is really important. The other aspect is what they love. And those two don't always match. Sometimes they can be passionate about something and they're not actually that good at it, but they probably will get really good at it if they love it after a while. Or more often, they're good at something, but they don't like it. In which case, do they want to spend years focusing on that subject or that area? It's an important question, happiness versus practicalities, and it's for you to discuss with your child, but it needs to be taken into account. And the career is very important, but again, I think it needs to be an open discussion where you have options, where you're not just saying, okay, everyone's in the family has always been a doctor, you must be a doctor, and that's it, but does it match what they're good at and what they love? So one of the most classic scenarios I've seen is students convinced they will study medicine because they want to please their parents. And they are okay at science, but not great, but they are amazing at other things. So like I've had students who are like really gifted with literature and history, let's say. And I can even think of a real case I had last year, really borderline with science. But the parents were really convinced that the child wanted to be a doctor. And that's not what the child was saying, but still it was. So in the end, the child chose all the most difficult science subjects you could pick to be a doctor. So it would be HR chemistry, HR biology, and HR math. And then left on the side the subjects that he was good at and he loved. So there was only one aspect of the triangle that was taken into account. And very often, these are the students who don't thrive in the DP and who then end up in our offices all the time. And sure enough, he started failing. He was very unhappy. And then through sheer determination, managed to scrape through, but did not have the grades necessary to go into any reputable medical school anywhere. And then ended up in a university in Turkey that was clearly after money, who required a massive deposit and things like that. It was all a bit, and of course now it's not going well. They've suddenly decided he needed to learn Turkish because some courses were no longer offered in English and things like that. So we do have to be careful not to be single-minded about career and about universities, because otherwise things can backfire really badly. And sadly, it's not an isolated example. It does happen often. And I'm going to hand over to Nicole to talk about the student CV, because I think it kind of goes with what I was just talking about. And that's another way that we prepare students for the university process, and that can start as early as actually in middle school. You can start in middle school to build your student CV. And a student CV is a great thing to have because it makes them aware of their own achievements and all the things they've done and their little certificates, and they can collect them and put them in a folder, and it's really lovely. However,
yeah, Nancy, as we were prepping for this, Nancy and I were just kind of talking about this goes in with your career and your activities, and it's quite paradoxical, because actually trying to do exactly the right thing for college for your CV can make you not as good of an applicant. So I was telling Nancy that I had a student probably 2 or 3 years ago who just loved history, and he sort of was allowed to pursue that. And he ended up doing this crazy like blacksmithing course and all kinds of stuff. And he was really one of my most interesting applicants to university, because he was very authentic. And so there's a really fine balance between helping students craft a good CV for college and allowing them to do the things they love. And then in the middle is the truth that their CV is their life. So actually the things on your resume are the things you're spending time doing. And you want to make sure as a parent that your students are getting the experiences they need to learn about themselves. So, are they understanding how they work with people, or how they do under high pressure situations, or what it's like to do service, or the discipline of sports. And so it's more than just actually what's on the paper. And in my experience, the students who have had authentic, meaningful learning experiences and life experiences that are reflected on their CV are typically the better applicants to college, not the ones who have sort of checked all the boxes. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So I was going to pitch in here with a few thoughts on kind of parents in the process. This slide is meant to reflect how you should think of yourself in the college process with your student, whether they're 8th grade or 12th grade. You are a coach, a consultant, an executive secretary. You are on a road trip with your child, and your child is driving, right? So you're not the one deciding how fast or how slow. That's your child's job. Your job is to help them create a schedule, to help them figure out what needs to be done when. One great example of this is standardized testing. So most of our students have to make a plan to take the SAT. It's very, very appropriate for parents to help their children make that plan, right? When are you going to take it? What does that mean? Who's going to take you there? But the student is taking the test, right? Anything about helping them facilitate parts of the process, getting that plan made, is very appropriate for you to help with. You are the coach, so you are encouraging them. You have a lot of emotional support to give, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And part of your job is to kind of communicate the rules. So a lot of our students are, their college pathway is dictated by things that their family has, factors that their family brings to bear. So money, location, willingness to sort of, you can go to this country, but not this country. And most of our students work within the parameters that their families give them, but they can't process their information if you don't give them the information. So we see this a lot with finances. And I think for parents, it's very difficult to say to your child, it'll be really hard for us to send you to the States for a 4-year education full price. And many of our families are able to do that. But for many of families, even in communities like this, it means dipping into retirement accounts or not vacationing or things like that. And your children need to know kind of the basic parameters of what your family's resources are, what you're willing to support, and then work within that. So you have a responsibility to communicate to them sort of the rules of the game, right? And all of our students are able, I've been doing this for 20 years, and students are always able to find options when their parents don't tell them, aren't transparent with them at the beginning, is when they have trouble. So I would encourage you, not to feel bad communicating some things that are parameters for you, because we can always work within that. That's why you have us. One of your jobs is to create a sense of calm and the sense that it will be okay. This time is really chaotic. And so if you think of yourself kind of like the executive secretary, like, when you have a great administrative assistant or executive secretary, like everything always feels okay, right? You know that the things are scheduled how they need to be scheduled, and the day will go well and the week will go well, and your children need to feel like that. And so just letting them know that you're there to back them up, that you're happy to sort of call and make that college tour appointment if they need you to. What you're not doing is writing their essays, filling out their applications, but you're creating a calm space for them where they feel like, okay, I can do this now, I can concentrate. Mom's not bugging me, dad's not like let's talk about it, like he was like, you're going to be a doctor kind of thing, but creating calm. I usually talk to senior parents a good bit about just boundarying a bit of the communication. So as a parent, if you feel like you focus on college a lot, maybe doing a check. I shared with Nancy the other day that I read a really interesting social media post where the family said they were going to count how many times they said the word college. And then after they got to a certain number, they weren't allowed to say it anymore. And I thought that was really an interesting way to do it. But I've heard other ways, like we only talk about this on Sunday afternoon. We only talk about it during dinner, and then after dinner, no more college talk. For students, it is, they love it, because this feeling that they're always getting nagged is very counterproductive for them. They're very stressed. And so I would just encourage you to create an environment that indicates that it's calm. It doesn't, if college applications are stressful, it's okay. You're there to help support them. So that kind of leads into one of my biggest observations. So I started off in selective admissions at Vanderbilt. And one of the reasons I went to get a counseling degree is because my very first year, we went through the cycle, someone's child didn't get in. And, he called me to talk about why his child shouldn't have get in. And he, made me cry, right? Like I was young, I was new. And my boss, my dean called me in and kind of talked to me. And he said, for these people, there's so much more going on, right? And for this father, the fact that he couldn't help give his child his dream, he's taking it out on you, basically. And it just started for me, this whole process of observing all of the pieces that are a part of the college application process that have nothing to do with college. And so as college counselors, we receive a lot of it, right? We receive a lot of the stress and the anger and the frustration and the anxiety, and we're happy to do so. But I find that families really make breakthroughs when they acknowledge the other pieces that are going on. So one of the biggest pieces that's going on is the transition from home. And in most of our societies, the leaving of home is the becoming an adult. That is the ritual. So that is when you grow up. And for families, I'm a mother myself, and I've watched students do this a long time. And I feel like when your children leave the home, it's probably the biggest transition, as big of a transition as when you have a baby, which is a huge transition. So there are these parenting transitions happening. I put a website here. I was reading this article this morning. I like this group. They focus exclusively on the ages surrounding the high school and college transition. It's a parent founded group. They wrote a book, but they have I follow their social media stuff. They write articles and stuff. This article I posted here is called Last Call for Senior Year. And this woman writes about the things that she wishes, if she had to go back, she would do these 7 things with her daughter in 12th grade. And I actually teared up a little reading it. It's just a good reminder that what we see in our office is people are focusing on applications. And then you forget, like it obscures the fact that this is a transition. This is the leaving home transition. And in 6 months, it's all over, right? And some of that energy gets put into the applications. And so I would just encourage you to try to develop some awareness around that if you're finding yourself really needing to harp on your student about applications or not wanting to talk about them, like what's going on with you? Are you feeling anxious about that they're going to be okay or not okay? Are you feeling them pulling away? For a lot of people, I would just encourage you to process that with someone besides your child. So, I've sat with a lot of parents over the years and just let them sort of, say like, my child's not doing this is hard, blah, blah. When all of that comes out on your child, it's a lot for them to hold. It's a lot for them to hold because they have their own really turbulent process going on inside. So parent groups are great for this, getting together for a cup of coffee or whatever with your friend or someone else who's kind of going through it, processing it with your spouse, your partner. And then, these like social media kind of like, watching what these other moms are doing, creating rituals. But think about like, what do you want your child's 10th, 11th, 12th grade year to be, if you think of it as just one more spring break or two more spring breaks or one more birthday. You know, I've had a lot of families say, okay, well, we're going to make sure that we do all our favorite restaurants this year. Like we're going to do family dinners at our favorite restaurants this year, you know, once a month. So people tend to wait too late, and they tend to wait until like March. And then by then the seniors are they're kind of gone. They're ready to go to college. So if you have siblings in the home, they're also undergoing a pretty big transition, and people tend to sort of forget about them. But your family unit as a whole to be kind of healthy and aware of these transitions that are happening, and providing some rituals, some spaces for people to kind of acknowledge, because there's a bit of grief that's with this, like with a leaving, a moving away. And so just giving everybody in your house some space to do that. Teenagers process emotions very difficultly and often at like 2 a.m. And so like, you know, just hunker down and be ready for it. In my opinion, the best thing in the world that your child can do is unleash on you, right? Like you are a great parent if your child feels like they can talk to you. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all you're after, is a relationship with your child, a loving relationship with your child. And it is, to be the person that a teenager unleashes on is very difficult. Nancy knows. So, you know, don't take it personally. Try to make yourself available at the kinds of times they like to talk. It might mean staying up a little bit late. It often means just holding back your own thoughts. So I asked my team this morning, like, what's the biggest no-no in the college process? And 2 of them said, just, you know, making it about you and not them, not holding back, not letting go. And so even though you're sitting there looking at them like, I know better than that, like you're so like, you don't know, like I can tell you, I've been through this, like they don't want to hear any of that. Like they just want you to be there and, I don't know, feed them ice cream or, you know, whatever, give them a hug or not, or just like let them, I don't know. It's you have to receive what they have to offer, is basically the way it goes with teenagers. And if they are offering you something, you're doing your job. So don't feel like you have to change them or fix them, like they're processing, and just let them process. As Nancy said, often the college process and the process of getting a career and growing up, like that process teaches people in itself. So like you don't have to teach them, you know, as a college counselor, I don't do a ton of like, you're not going to get in here, this is not going to happen, because the process, it really does a lot of that. And so I really feel like part of our role is just supporting in that. Okay, a quick one on kind of your parenting legacy, which is a silly way to put it, but, you know, think about what skills you want your children to have when they go into the adult world. So I've put here budgeting, cooking, driving. I know a lot of our students don't drive, and relationships. I mean, yes, we're way past the birds and bees talks, but, you know, Nancy shared with us, will you tell me about your friend who, is that appropriate to share, who told her daughter to get in a relationship?
Yes. So yes, I had a wonderful colleague who was a great mom, and her child was so focused on studying. She ended up being the valedictorian. She got a 45 in her DP. She was outstanding. But in her last year of high school, her mom said, I want you to date because I want you to have some experience before you go off to college. And I want you to date while I'm here at home to advise you. And she was almost forcing her daughter to date, which I thought was so odd, but also kind of a great idea at the same time. So
yeah, and I think just thinking about those, especially at an IB school and all these academics and homework and studying for the SAT, this stuff gets lost. But you know, happy adults are functional adults who know how to take care of themselves, who have the skills they need to make it in the world. So you can also make this stuff really fun. Like it's a nice stress relief for students who are having to study and stuff. And then the last bit is just, I think about the end in mind. Like when your child gets their rejection, you know, from Harvard, or their acceptance to their dream school or whatever, who do you want to be in that moment? And then how do you get there? You want your child to feel unconditionally loved and accepted. well, then think about what that means every step of the way. Does that mean that you message that, like, do you say that every time you talk about college, no matter what happens, we're here for you and we'll help you, or is it something that you structure in terms of their list, or in terms of just how your family talks about it? But I think people forget, and they forget that it's not what you say when the letters come, it's what you've done all along the way that actually lets children know who their parents are. And so, if you say all along, if they feel all along the way that your love is conditional on some type of result, then you can't change your mind when the result comes in. For them, they will still feel like they've disappointed you. And so I think just to think really carefully about your messaging with your kids about what does college mean in your family, what kinds of things mean success. There are lots of ways to talk about success that don't have to do with the names of universities. And I'm happy to give suggestions if you are struggling with that. I've thought about this a lot, but just that's the end. And then once they kind of get in, that's it. It's over. Poof, the whole thing is done. And your relationship with your child goes on, right? And so just to keep that perspective about the university admissions process, it's very consuming. And the students will not be the ones to give us perspective. And so we have to keep the perspective for them. They're allowed, it's their biggest thing they've encountered so far in their life, and they're allowed to be totally consumed with it. And our job as adults is to give them the bigger perspective. Like, hey, you're still my child. You're still my beautiful child who sings like an angel, right? Or, wherever you go, I'm excited to take a trip there to visit you, and we'll find the best bakery in town, or, just these things that help them remember that there's not just one thing that defines success for them. And there's not just one thing that defines your relationship. That's it for me. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that last point a little bit. It's very surprising how many students, when they don't get into their college, or when they're talking about not getting in, don't talk about themselves, but talk about their parents. So they very often they'll say, oh, my parents will be so disappointed. Or even worse, they'll say, my parents will be so mad, they're going to kill me. You hear that a lot. And often it's not the case. It's how they've built it up in their head, and some of the messaging along the way that makes them, they're not thinking, I will be disappointed. They're thinking, my parents will be disappointed. And that's really sad, because they have to deal with their own disappointment, which is already huge, but they also have to deal with disappointing their parents, and they're only 18. And so it's a lot on their little shoulders, and it can be a bit heartbreaking. So I think it's okay to push, and it's okay to aim really high and to celebrate when they do well. But I think it's important for them to know there's a plan B, and to be able to talk about the plan B and the plan C and say, okay, so here are the options. You might go there, you might go there, you might go there. We're all hoping for that one. But if you go there, there's also these good points. You'll be closer to grandma. And then in that one, you'll be actually, that's where your uncle went, or, just finding some kind of silver linings in all the different scenarios, so that they're not crushed and devastated if they don't go into the absolute best one, which often you'll have a rich university. So the likelihood that every student is going to get into that top choice it's not going to happen. Like it's
30%.
Yeah,
I can give you the numbers. Yeah. And Nancy was saying about college visits, I think is fun. Like if as COVID opens up, if you're able to do some of that, then you can say things like, well, if you go to the University of Virginia, there's that brownie shop, and like, even though those things are silly, then you've had the experience together, and you can sort of talk about things that aren't just to do with the very serious academics and things like that, right? You can make some little special things that are just for you, right? Okay. Should we do some questions?
Yeah, so I'm going to open the chat, and I'm hoping there's 103 of you, so surely there will be some questions. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to send us some questions. I'm very surprised no one's asked questions yet.
I know Zoom is
So you've got it a chat box. You can type in your questions and we will answer them.
Can someone tell us hello, just so we know you're out there?
Oh,
Hey, Madeline.
thank you, Madeline, for saying hello. So you have no questions? You must have questions. Can you maybe tell us roughly when the process starts, like
Yeah,
SFS,
sure.
like what are the big milestones for the process?
Yeah, so let's see, if you have a senior, you know that now we're into more of the waiting part, finishing up applications and waiting, which in my opinion is one of the hardest parts of the process because there's nothing you can do. At least in the applications, there are things you can do, but it's very, very, very hard, very lots to do, you know, August to November of 12th grade, and a little bit beyond that. And then spring of 11th grade is that time of really intensive and good meeting students, families, counselors, making the list, talking about criteria, making the plan. Fall of 11th grade, which is now, we're starting to do some education on, you know, I'm meeting with 11th graders right now. They're kind of starting to reflect on themselves, doing some university research pretty soon. And so we're getting them started. We're meeting them some, you know, 10th grade spring semester. I'm going backwards. 10th grade spring semester, you're going to do you're going to do DP choices pretty soon, right? So starting right after the Christmas break. And that's really when the serious university stuff starts, because if you're going UK, Europe, anywhere like that, the DP choices really matter. And so for better or worse, sometimes you have to start to have a real sense of things, you know, spring of 10th grade as you make your DP choices. In 9th grade, we do a lot of encouraging students to make friends, join clubs, start to get to know themselves, like some of the stuff we're talking about with self-knowledge, trying things, getting life experiences, and getting academically settled. Many of the students here do SAT in the summer after 10th grade, and then take the SAT right at the beginning of 11th grade. They seem to do well with that and get very high scores. It's not necessary to do testing that early. You can do testing all the way up through kind of the middle of 12th grade. Through like October of 12th grade, but that seems to be kind of the timeline here. DP choices, do your SAT during SAT, and then you kind of start into the college process across 11th grade, apps in 12th grade. We got some questions coming in.
We have a great question here. What is your view on college consultants, whether they are a good idea, and if so, when is a good time to start?
Yeah, so I was a consultant, so I'm you know, well aware. I think I mean, I don't have a sort of yes or no, college consultants are bad or good. I do think that certain consultants are very hurtful. So I would say, you know, we're pretty open to families using consultants. It doesn't offend me or bother me. I'm happy to work with them, but I would suggest that you reach out and I can maybe give you some criteria for what you might want to look for in a good consultant, what kind of consultant you would use. And then I would just remind you that the university counselor is the primary contact for the colleges. And so if you put the process elsewhere, like in the hands of the consultant and mostly lean on the consultant, then it can end up disadvantaging your student, because then if, like, say Harvard calls me to ask about X child, I don't know anything because they really haven't told me much. I did see this year some consultants kind of hold up the process. Like I had students saying they couldn't write essays because they couldn't meet with their consultant, kind of thing. So, you know, just making sure you're in sync with what we're doing here. But, you know, some of them are good, some of them are not. And it can be helpful to have a place to go get the stuff done. You're not going to find any better experts than we have here. So if you're on the fence and the money could be used elsewhere, we're happy to take full care of you here. I mean, we have an incredibly skillful team and experienced team. Like literally, we know everything in the world. Like it's incredible. So I would just let you know that you have what you need here. And then you can make your decision, but you don't need consultants. So.
Sorry, we're not taking questions orally because we have 100 people still, so it's a little bit chaotic, and we're recording as well. So it's better if you can type your question, please. Okay, so we have another question, which is how important are the DP-HL choice in relation to college major choice? Is if the HLs are mixed, not straight science, for example, is that odd to application readers? I just want to make one point about that, and then I'll hand over to Nicole. It depends. Of course, it depends on the situation. But there is one thing is that that I've seen a lot is that students pick HL. In some cases, the HL subjects are a lot harder. In some others, they're just more. So, for example, if you do history, HL history is just an extra. You study just more history. It's not harder. It's just an extra option. So you'll study more countries and more times in history. However, if you're doing HL physics, for example, or HL mathematics analysis, it's much harder. So you have to be very careful because your overall number of points may suffer if the student picks HLs that are really difficult. So the balance between the HLs is really important. So yes, of course, for certain applications, the HLs are crucial, that you wouldn't be able to apply for medical school in Europe, for example, without chemistry HL. It would be extremely difficult. So there are some courses where you really need those HLs. However, to take all the most difficult HLs in the world, it makes it, I've seen really good students crumble and then end up with 4s everywhere and actually end up being much more hurt. So they had like HL physics, HL chemistry, HL math analysis, and they were good at those subjects, but because the 3 are very heavy and very difficult, the combination just crushed the students and they ended up with 4s and 3s, which really didn't help them to get into university at all. And they had to go to a random university in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So you have to be strategic. Students have to be strategic with like the HLs that are needed, but also building a course that's actually, that's realistic and that they can handle, because HL, certain subjects can really, one badly picked HL, I don't want to put too much pressure, but one badly picked HL can be fatal to their diploma.
Yeah, Nancy's pretty much got it. So that's why we have a counseling process around DP. I love the DP counseling process with 10th graders. I think it's just fantastic. It's a great way to think about strengths and weaknesses. And I would just encourage you to engage in that with us, engage in that with your students. Typically, the only times you must have certain DP classes are to the UK and Europe. Occasionally you see a bit of that in Canada, like if you were coming, but in the US universities, it doesn't matter. So.
And if you're going to the UK, which is quite a few of our kids now, they actually are very interested in the points you get in your HL. So very often they will say, okay, we offer, our typical offer is 34 points overall with 665 at HL. If you look at university entry requirements in the UK, it's almost always like that. But they don't always care what you're doing at HL. They just care that you're really good at the things you think you're really good at, that you're excelling in some subjects. So you have to be a bit careful. And I've seen applicants be very clever about this. And for example, they look at some schools and they'll do like, okay, I'm going to do HL bio and chemistry, but I'm also going to do HL English instead of taking an extra math difficult kind of course, and that becomes much more balanced for them. It depends on your child, of course, but yeah, we are nearly done. I can see it's a very popular topic, so we will continue. There's a couple of quick questions. Maybe we can take. The one is about a template for student CVs.
Yeah, I can answer that quickly. I'm new. I'm still in the process of like getting all the things. I do have a template I've used with students in the past, and we will have a template. So if you are working with a 9th or 10th grader, you don't need a template. Like, you just need a piece of paper. Like, what are you doing? How much time does it take? Look at it all on a piece of paper. Like, you can literally I usually just recommend for 9th graders, you just keep a list. And this is that executive secretary job. Like, if you want to keep the list, in a note on your iPhone or whatever, just so you don't forget that they got this poetry award in 9th grade or something like that. But just keep a list, and then you can look at the list. And then once a student applies to like a summer program, and then when they get into the college application process, that's when it needs to be sort of formatted. Many students don't really need a CV, but I'm pretty sure that we have built into the current curriculum the creation of a resume in spring of 11th grade. This is my first cycle through. But if it's not there, it will be built in, and that's where it will be. So it'll be kind of coming up with our juniors. Yeah. Common Up and supplementals. Stephanie, your question about essays, email me and or we can have a quick phone chat. But yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a little bit more specific exactly about the process, and a little bit more specific as you head into 12th grade. So I'll maybe put that one aside to the next time. But you can reach out to me, Stephanie.
Okay, I can talk very quickly about the difference between US applications and other applications. Others is a very broad term here because it's still, there are a lot of differences between applications in different countries. Typically, the process for the US is a lot more involved. So that's really
so much more involved.
I mean, it's completely different. Yeah. In schools where very few students go to US universities, typically you don't have many counselors. That's, it's much easier for just a simple teacher to deal with a UCAS application, for example, for the UK. And for most countries, it's actually fairly straightforward. It doesn't mean we don't guide the students just as much, but because their process is a lot simpler, it can sometimes seem that we're focusing a lot on the US applications, but it's because they do need those hours. It is a lot more complex.
Yeah, and the US applications run pretty early compared to the others. So we have students matriculating to Australia and New Zealand from last year's class, and they still, aren't in college. So like, I mean, it's a whole different, like a lot of the other countries wait for the results, or having your IB results is a part of the process. In the US, it's not the case. So, you see a lot of the US stuff early and it comes heavy and hard, but then the other processes kind of trickle through. So my Canadian students are just now starting. My Korean students, I won't really start working with until the spring. Australian students, we don't work with until the following fall. So it's all over the place. US is the most complex by like 100,000 times, which is why I have the job.
Do you want to say a quick word about the number of choices that we now allow students?
Like excessive. Yeah, I mean, we changed our limit, and I haven't lived through it yet, so we'll see. So far so good. Everybody's doing great. So I think everybody's doing great. So
okay. And someone just asked, this will be the last question. Someone just asked about names of website that can support parents during this time. I think the best thing we can do is for Nicole to give me a couple of names, some of them that are the presentation. And then when we send the recording of this presentation, we can include in that email, we can include a couple of websites that we like. Thank you so much, everyone. It was great to have so many parents. I think you waited a long time for this talk, and that's why we're so popular today. But it also tells us that it is a topic that is important to parents, of course, and that you want to talk about more. And that's great to know, because it means that we can schedule more, and we're always very happy to talk to you. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and we will send you the recording very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.